Hey guys, welcome to video number 3 of the blockchain series. This is going to be blockchain 103, Bitcoin, decentralized money, or the internet of money. Sometimes you will even hear the money of the internet. Matt Jerry Voke. This is my opinions only. It does not express the opinions of United States Special Operations Command, the Air Force, or the Department of Defense. So let's get started. What are we doing here? Why do we care? Well, the internet is really good at propagating data and information. That is very bad for money. If you can copy and send something and then send it somewhere else, that is obviously not good for money that can be used widely. Also, fiat currencies have a difference between the minter of the currency and the user of the currency. The incentives are misaligned there, especially nowadays. Transferring value is extremely slow and expensive. Have you ever tried to send money at 9 o'clock at night to a bank or somebody else? Have you ever tried sending money on the weekend or a holiday? Have you ever tried sending money to somebody in Colombia, Venezuela, or Argentina? There's some problems with our digital money nowadays, and it's not as efficient and effective as it could be potentially. Fiat currencies also are notoriously bad at not lasting. There's only been one currency that's lasted a decent amount of time, and that isn't really a good use case example. For instance, the pound sterling has lasted 317 years, but it has lost 99.5% of its value. So calling it a successful fiat currency is kind of an oxymoron. Most don't last due to inflation, hyperinflation, due to wars, corruption, other things. We've seen that numerous times throughout the world. So the problem's laid out. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the history of money or currency. We're going to talk about Bitcoin, how it was born, what it is. Then we'll talk about some of the features, what makes Bitcoin so awesome. And then we'll talk about mining and transactions, because that is exactly what makes Bitcoin so powerful, the network behind it. We'll talk about the dangers and challenges, and then we'll talk about which one's better, the US dollar, Bitcoin, or gold. Brief history of money. Unsure exactly, because it predates written history, which was first barter or debt. It's believed that debt likely was, because it's a little bit hard to trade a chicken for a cow. If I have a chicken, you're not going to give me a cow for the chicken. But if I give you 10 chickens over the course of a month, then maybe you're going to give me that cow. The problem with debt-based systems is it's hard to scale beyond like 20 debtors. I don't know exactly who owes whom what. So representation came into the scene. Trading shells, salt, rye stones are a really good example. They're also a good example because they were the first public ledger, if you will. These large stones, which are semi-immobile, were placed in large public areas, and then the stones weren't actually transferred, but the ownership or fractional ownership of those stones was transferred for goods or services. So I could give you a chicken, you could give me a little bit of your rye stone, for instance. Potentially the first triple entry ledger there, but another discussion altogether. Lydia minted the first currency. Then you see a lot of banks and governments coming into this, because they're able to essentially create money and then have a lot of control over what occurs with that money. Western Union revolutionized currency and money because it was for the first time digital. You were able to beep and squeak, send money to somebody else over long distances very fast. Reserve banking was removed, absolutely detrimental to what we previously knew as money and currency, because it used to be backed by something physical, call it gold or something less valuable. 1971 was the last time that actually happened. That backing was removed, and what now is known as fiat currencies were born. Fiat meaning that it is not backed by anything other than the government saying that that is good. But it is not good if you try to all, as a nation, go try to change all of your money in at the same time. Maybe the first 10% will get it, and then those banks will be closed and withdrawals will be canceled, like we've seen through some of Latin America currently. Credit cards were absolutely phenomenal for use on the internet, both growth hand in hand, and then Apple, Alipay, WeChat Pay absolutely skyrocketed, especially in China right now as well. So what is Bitcoin? How did Bitcoin get born? Well, if you remember in 2007, 2008, there was some large failures of the banking system, housing market, credit systems, and large pumps of liquidity in the markets. The amount of debt globally just skyrocketed. The charts on the top right, if you want to look at that, you can see that the amount of $100 saved over 100 years just absolutely plummeted because the inflation. And the inflation in the lower two graphs, you can see as well just how much that skyrocketed. Shortly after 2000, it got a lot worse than it normally was. So Satoshi Nakamoto, a pseudonym of an individual or a group of individuals, put out a white paper for Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. A little bit different nowadays. It's not necessarily used as cash, more of a store of value, but it was absolutely a huge innovation in essentially establishment mainstreaming of a triple entry accounting public ledger. Triple entry, if you want to think about it, I have my ledger, you have your ledger, and then there's also a public ledger as well. And the reason for that public ledger is if I and you disagree on who owns whom what, that public ledger can easily solve that because everybody can see what the truth data is. If Alice owes Bob, that public ledger will say so. That ledger is maintained by nodes and miners, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but basically it's distributed so that if one individual is taken out, that ledger still exists. That network is very powerful. There is no physical manifestation. If you get a Bitcoin, you're getting it electronically. Any sort of physical coin is just a novelty that goes along with that. It is pseudonymous. We'll talk about that. It is transparent, meaning you can see every address and transaction that occurs on the network. And because of that, it is tamper evident and tamper resistant. You're not going to be able to go in there and adjust how much money is in your bank account because everybody would be able to see that. They would declare it invalid and reject it. It is trust minimizing or transferring. I do not have to trust you in order to do a transaction with you. I do not have to trust a middleman to escrow something to you. I can trust code, mathematics, and cryptography to do that instead. So some people call it trust minimizing, I call it trust transfer. Decentralization is extremely powerful in the Bitcoin network. Your money is not seizable, it's not confiscatable, it's not able to be adjusted without your permission. There is no central authority for the CIA, FBI, IRS to go knock on their door and confiscate anything. Anybody can join and anybody can validate and get rewarded for mining those transactions. So essentially, if you can see the picture with the bank isn't able to tell her that she can't make that transaction because the bank doesn't exist. It's a network of individuals or organizations. The pseudonymity and transparency are also critical here. So Bitcoin doesn't belong to individuals, it belongs to wallets. It technically belongs to private keys. An individual can have 1 or 10,000 private keys to public addresses. And for that nature, for that reason, you don't know exactly who owns what Bitcoin. You can suppose and you can put a statistical probability on it, but you're never able to know for 100% exactly owns what Bitcoin. So every transaction, as you can see, Alice, the sender, is sending a specific amount to an individual we don't even know, a certain amount to Bob, and then the rest of that transaction is coming back to Alice. It is fast and cheap, and when I say fast and cheap, it's always relative, right? So the average Bitcoin transaction fee right now is 30 cents. So if you say if you're buying something over $3, that's probably all right. Anything less than that, it's probably not going to be very good. And then the average transaction time to be secured onto the blockchain is 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes, there's a block being mined and then added to that chain. Based on the security, you can wait for no blocks to be mined, or you can wait for 20 blocks to be mined. So verification in 0 minutes to 2 hours, whatever you want. For instance, one of the most recent transactions that was very, very large was $1 billion in September of 2019 was transferred for $690 fee. So if you want to look at how small the percentage is there, and then compare what you think the wire charge would have been if that was wired electronically internationally. And most importantly, it never closes. Bitcoin never sleeps. What is mining? You guys might have heard this. It's not dudes with picks and shovels actually doing anything. It's individuals or organizations securing the public ledger and validating transactions to add to that ledger. The winner is the individual or the machine, more accurately, who guesses a number, a nonce, a number that only occurs once, for a hash, a SHA-256, that is able to get below a leading number of zeros to be added onto the Bitcoin blockchain, for instance. So the difficulty is set every 2 weeks. Whenever an individual or organization mines with a difficulty underneath that threshold, that is then added to that blockchain. Subsequent blocks are added on top of that, and then the deeper that your block is in that blockchain, the more difficult it is for you to tamper with that block. Proof of work, POW, incentivizes good behavior, so your incentives are to do the correct thing that's in line with the rest of the community so that you can be rewarded with more Bitcoins, which are obviously valuable. The dangers and challenges. The pseudonymity quality can be used to avoid the law, things, people, etc. So if I want to buy some heroin on the internet, I'm not going to use dollars sent from my bank account to a drug dealer. I'm going to try to use the most shady method that I can. If I'm trying to avoid international sanctions, other things, I'm not going to be using bank account transfer. The interesting part is that you might have heard the Silk Road. The individuals that were doing this were absolutely able to be traced because their Bitcoin addresses were easily tied to those individuals. And the leader of the Silk Road and a couple agents as well were imprisoned for the lack of good security of that pseudonymity, if you will. Tax and legal status throughout the world are very murky, and it's always in a constant flux, especially in areas like China and India, and the US IRS always has, and the SEC always have some interesting things to say about it. It's still nascent, so there could be bugs. Don't invest billions of dollars if one bug is going to bring that tumbling down. If you lose your private keys, you lose access to your public address. Therefore, all of your Bitcoins in that are gone. They're essentially locked in there forever. If you die and you're the only one that knows what your private key is, sorry kids, there is no succession plan for these Bitcoins. Once you send Bitcoin, they cannot be retrieved after that block has been minted. So if I'm sending you a good on eBay and you're unhappy with that, you can claim to your credit card that I frauded you and get that money back. Not so with Bitcoin. If I send you something and it's a paper instead of a nice thing that you asked for, you cannot take your Bitcoin back from me. Benefits and challenges. All right, let's see which one's the better money or currency here. These are some of the basic properties of what makes money hard, or what is good money. Scarcity. There's not a large supply of this currency or money coming onto the scene every year. Bitcoin, there's only going to be 21 million blocks mined ever. 18 million of them about right now have been mined. Just like gold, all the gold that's been mined so far is able to fill up an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It's very limited amount of supply coming online. Just same with Bitcoin. US dollar, other fiat currencies, the Federal Reserve and others can just print it as much as they want. The portability. I can memorize a 12 or 24 word seed phrase and take that wherever I want, literally nothing on me. I can take it across borders and other things. They might give me a little bit of problem in the airport if I try to go across naked though. The divisibility. Gold, a little bit hard to chip away at that gold bar to use. Dollar can be divisible electronically. Bitcoin divisible to one Satoshi, which is a very, very minute amount of money. The fungibility, meaning that one unit is seen as the same as another unit. The fungibility of the dollar for the most part, is very good. The gold scientifically looks identical to the others. Bitcoin's like a green, yellow here, but Bitcoin's good because you don't exactly know everything that's happened to taint that Bitcoin. Sometimes it can be tied to illicit activity in the past, but most Bitcoins, it's a very low probability that it was actually used previously for illicit activities if you have your hands on it and you're not the one that actually did the illicit activities. Durability. Dollar, very easy to burn. Gold, very, very difficult to destroy. Bitcoin, semi-durable, but again, you lose those private keys, gone. Acceptability. Bitcoin obviously isn't accepted nearly as many places as the US dollar. Neither is gold. You go to any store and ask them if they accept gold or Bitcoin, they're probably going to say they accept Bitcoin before they accept gold, but almost not usable in day-to-day life, although there have been some people that have lived off of Bitcoin for a month or two. Counterfeiting. Easy to counterfeit US dollar. People do it all the time for hundreds, sometimes 20s. And gold, difficult to counterfeit well, especially if you're going to actually take a good look at it. And then Bitcoin, impossible to counterfeit without an extremely large amount of investment, a very high amount of hash power to subvert the whole network. So there we go. Some pluses and minuses to Bitcoin. We'll see where this goes in the future. Very exciting. Bitcoin is a huge innovation, largest we've seen since, we'll call it artificial intelligence renaissance here. So we'll see where it goes. But if you like this video, this is episode number 3. I'd like to do about 5 to 10 of these. So let me know what you guys would like to see in this blockchain series. And as always, hit the thumbs up, like, definitely hit the subscribe, and leave me a comment if you guys want to know how I did or what you want to see in this series as well. Thanks. Bye.